Uh-oh, what happens?
Mm-hmm.
I see we have temporarily lost Metta. Oh, here she comes.
Well, something went wrong, but it's always a new thing, you know, a new thing goes wrong every time. So it is live, but I have to look at this window to turn off my sound. You're not hearing me, so I guess it's off.
Yes, well, we're hearing you.
I mean, you're not hearing the multiple thing. There's an echo thing if I don't do this right. Anyway, it looks like I did something wrong, but it's all worked out, I guess. So here we are, we're ready to go. Okay, now I'm going to record, and it was, all right. Adam, make sure please that we're live. It says we're live, but please go look, because I'm worried that there's something funny going on. Because I think I accidentally touched the wrong button. Anyway, we're about to start for what it's worth. Okay.
I can assure you I'm alive. I don't know if you can see that I'm alive.
Okay.
Great.
Good. Hold your horses now. I'm going to introduce you. Hello. Hi, I'm Metta Spencer. And today we're going to go, this is a schmooze day. So I don't tell people what to talk about. We're going to find out what everybody's interested in. And I have 4 guests with me today. Three guests and I don't know what to call Adam because he's not a guest. He runs the show as much as I do. Anyway, David Harries is a nuclear engineer turned rugby coach, and with a lot of other things to his credit, many different global organizations that he belongs to, including having been the chair of the Canadian Pugwash Group. And so then John Foster, and by the way, John and David are both in Kingston. It just turns out that they're probably neighbors and had never met before, but now they're going to know each other. John Foster is an economist, an energy economist who's an expert on pipelines around the world. And I've had him on my show several times because, my goodness, I don't know anybody else who knows as much about pipelines as he does. And Sister Mary Ellen Francoeur is a sister of service, which means she does good things for the Catholic world, I presume. She is, and for the rest of us. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And she was trained as a clinical psychologist and works very much in the community of peace activists. And so I see her in all kinds of movements. And Adam Wynn is with me because he's always here. Bless his heart. He's very, very helpful. He's my assistant and I couldn't get along without him. So good morning, folks. Nice to see everybody. Everybody happy today?
Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. So let's see. I'm going to start off with David Harries because you actually had 3 things. I was asking people in advance what we're interested in and what we're thinking about today. And you pointed out at least 2 things that I think I want to see if I believe we'll all enjoy following up on. One is you're interested in the democracy conference that Biden is going to put together and a webinar that you have recently heard. So tell us about it and see if other people don't feel like joining in on some of those issues.
Thanks, Metta. And I'm happy to see everybody, meet everybody. Adam, thank you for all your help with a variety of things. The Democracy Summit. I guess I wasn't surprised to see this announced some weeks ago, but I've been increasingly engaged in following all the comment of different people about it. So the first thing I did is I went to find out who was invited. And I notice there are a lot of people that if we're trying to promote democracy could probably use the help, but aren't invited. And it's an interesting list, some of which I'm interested in viscerally because I've done some peacekeeping in some of these countries. So Mali, Morocco, Sudan, Ethiopia, Russia, China, Myanmar, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, and the Vatican, they aren't invited. Now, I don't know the reason for this. I'd be interested in hearing your comments. One thing I have been following along with this event is the Freedom House's, I think it's now the 17th year they say we're in a democracy recession. So either this is a really important conference or it's not a really important conference at all. And that's where I am right now.
I think pretty clearly he hasn't invited people that he doesn't consider democratic. I don't know why he wouldn't consider the Pope democratic, but maybe we'll find out. Anyway, yeah, who else?
To comment on that point or to introduce a new point?
Whatever.
Oh.
Yeah, what's on your mind, John?
Well, I'd like to comment back to David. I'm very pleased he raised that. I mean, what is this democracy summit all about? And you who's pointed out the company it keeps and the company, those who have not been invited, and those who have been invited suddenly at the last moment. I'm thinking there of Pakistan. And what I see in this is a diplomatic effort within Washington to say to the rest of the world, you're either with us or you're against us. It's shades of your George Bush all over again, to bring people on board. And those who were not invited are basically excluded, and they have a bad smell, so you better not be associated with them. Will that work? Well, clearly, I think it would work with Canada. It will work with Europe, and Japan, and a few other countries that are particularly close to the US. Other countries, I suspect they'll go along. They'll turn up in Washington because they have to, or they'll send. And that won't, I think, however, do what perhaps the United States wants them to do, which is to blackball China. And of course, Russia too, particularly China, I think. I sense that Washington is particularly concerned about the Belt and Roads Initiative, this idea of China financing and helping finance so many infrastructure projects around the world that connect up, interconnectivity, that they're all basically friendly with China and might think that the Western view promulgated, particularly out of Washington, about bad China is a lot of hooey.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mary Ellen, do you have a thought?
Well, I haven't been following this particular event, but from what David and John are saying, it's rather distressing that a nation like the United States would be calling some nations together, and it would appear with an agenda. So being very particular and who's invited and who's not. And again, what I'm hearing is that there's all kinds of politics going on, and that's always, well, I guess there's bound to be politics, but it's distressing to me when there isn't a trust that if we gather all the nations together, there might be greater wisdom that would emerge rather than making decisions ahead of time and going in with an agenda. So not following it closely, I mean, that's all that I could comment on. It's very distressing.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. I don't feel distressed. I feel distressed about the fact that it's necessary. And I'm not optimistic that it'll work, but it's pretty clear that Biden is focused now on what he considers a titanic struggle between democracy and all others being mostly China, I gather, but certainly Putin. Any country that explicitly or very clearly doesn't consider itself democratic or even want to be. And that really is a threat. So I personally think democracy is on the ropes. And he really is now at the point of saying, if we don't pull up our socks, we're going to find that these other countries that say they're doing better than we are actually doing better than we are. They're able to do, get a COVID vaccine into people's arms when we can't, and they get, et cetera. Whatever they would decide that they want to do, they can do. Their economies are going better, et cetera. So we're going to lose out as democratic countries unless we find a way to make some changes. And that's true. But to me, the worst thing is not just that democracies are not succeeding as democracies, but that they are succeeding very well as democracies in allowing people the voters to decide what they want, when in fact the voters are too messed up to know what they should want. So they make absolutely idiotic decisions, like, if 40% of the US population believes that Donald Trump is wonderful, there's something really psychiatrically wrong with the whole society. And it's not just the US society, because you've got Brazil, you've got Hungary, you've got a whole, Philippines, you've got a lot of other places where democracies are really in trouble because they really do elect people by choice who are idiots and malevolent idiots. And so I'm really scared for democracy, but probably not for the reason that he is. I think I think we're in deep trouble globally. So here, you've given me a platform, David, to enunciate things that you probably didn't want to hear. Go on, David, your turn.
Yeah, I guess for me, part of this is why now? As in why 7 December, especially coming from the President of the United States, whose country has a very significant history day called 7 December. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether, I'm not a conspiratorialist. I'm not even into conspiratorialism. But, yesterday we heard that the U.S. is boycotting the Olympics, which by some standards is one of the most democratic things that happen all the time, whether it's done well, whether it's only for money, whether it's for the athletes, whatever. So the timing is one thing. And these days, whenever I see lists of things, and lists is one of my other big issues, if I see Russia and China in the same list, I immediately open my eyes wider to find out why they're both in the same list. And this, if the democracy recession worries me, which it does, having lived in Indonesia under Suharto, it worried me massively until he fell. I'm really worried about how strongly Russia and China are agreeing to do things together. And they each has comparative advantages. And as we all know, neither is remotely likely to be a democracy in our lifetime. So I'm getting curiouser and curiouser.
Do you have a theory?
A theory about why the Russia-China thing, or the timing?
Yeah, I think it's as obvious as the nose on your face. I mean, they don't like democracy, and both of them, that's all they need to have in common. That's enough. Both of them are autocrats, and they're very successful autocrats. Certainly China is. I don't know how successful you want to call Putin, but he's been in power long enough. You have to give him credit for something. Durability.
There's an article I think in the Times today recently, sort of dissing the statement that Russia is in decline, that Russia is far from being in decline. It has incredible strengths. And I agree with that. Little sideline here. I am an Arctic fanatic. I love the Arctic. I wouldn't live there because I couldn't do all the things I would like to do there, but I have worked there and built things there. And Canada has a huge Arctic that it is ignoring. And Russia is having a heyday with its building, rebuilding, revitalization, energy. And guess who's tagging along with them with the money? China. So again, John, you're in the energy mindset. Is this a threat?
This whole issue of threats and geopolitics and all that is something which I suppose I feel now a liberty to indulge in and speculate about being retired. During my working life, that was the last thing either I could do without losing my job, or even it went through my head. And I don't think it went through the heads of my colleagues particularly. I was working for quite a lot of at that time in Washington, and certainly I only opened my mouth when I crossed the border north back into Ontario again. At the time of Vietnam, and then more recently the time of 9/11. So I guess I did a lot of traveling for my job, for my work and my job, which, petroleum economist is what I mostly have done in life, but I've also have another very strong element, which is international development. And so I heard my ears pricked up with great interest when I heard, David, you say that you have been in Indonesia during Suharto's time, if I recall. I was at the World Bank at that time, and I made a number of trips out to Indonesia just after Suharto had come to power. And that's a euphemism as to how he came to power. He seized power, but of course, Indonesia became, post-Sukarno, the love child of the United States. And so the World Bank couldn't shovel enough money into Indonesia, which is what the game was about. And then that was part of my going back into, I suppose, petroleum economics. The question was how much money went from the Pertamina, the national oil company of Indonesia, into the Ministry of Finance for Economic Development, through taxation, and how much of it was quietly siphoned off ashore into military bank accounts in Hong Kong. Nobody really knew. But finally, of course, maybe when you were there, Indonesia, Pertamina went bankrupt in one big bang. So, and then I had another 11 years, that was 11 years in Washington with the Inter-American Development Bank, which is another cousin of the World Bank. And so Canada's a member of that. And so that was in the 90s. And then the name of the game was, which I hadn't realized whatsoever, being a bit naive, was neoliberalism, which was basically getting away from the financing of public sector projects like ports and dams and irrigation and the rest of it, to electric power particularly, to privatizing them. And so that's when I got wet by going to Nicaragua. About at least a dozen times, and to Honduras next door, about the same number, as well as other places in Latin America. And so I guess with all that, I started to wonder, what is the meaning of this word democracy? Certainly the Sandinistas would feel that they were patriots. They're back in office again. And they with an election which was highly supervised by foreigners, and seems to have been democratic. It seems to be the will of the Nicaraguans. but they're on the blacklist. They're not invited to the conference in Washington that's
Sorry,
coming
are
up
you
on
saying that,
democracy.
John, are you saying that their recent election was democratic?
Yes, I certainly am. And I would say also that it's being painted to the contrary in Washington and therefore by the US press, which we pick up in the Globe and Mail and elsewhere.
Oh, because I'd heard, very much the contrary. So go ahead.
Yes. So at any rate, so where I come from on governments is you have to, that as a country, Canada, we have to work with what we have and how the world is out there. And all countries may not be perfect in the way they run themselves. They may not be quite so autocratic as the way that they're painted. Certainly the US is a very strange kind of democracy from some points of view. I take a kind of let's treat the world as it is and see what we can do in the national interest to get on with them. What I fear is that democracy is used as a tool of a geopolitical tool from Washington, also out of Ottawa, to change governments. It's a way of change of democratic, forgive me, of regime change, as financed by such bodies as the NED, what does that stand for? The
National Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, that's the one. That's enough from me. I'm starting to.
Wait a minute. What do you have against? Sorry, what do you have against NED?
Well, the NED was spawned out of the CIA, whatever it was, 25 years or so ago, where it was the CIA that had been financing regime change, as in Guatemala or Chile. And this was it puts the thing a bit at arm's length, but the funds are still shoveled into the NED from State Department and from Congress, and from there into all sorts of groups supported by the US in the recipient country who seek regime change. And a case for that is Belarus right now, big time money. My thought is that democracy promotion is the phrase, looks good, but what is it? And our press doesn't talk about it.
Well, I'm in favor of it. I really think that, in most of those countries,
I'm in favor of leaving alone.
There are people really who don't have rights, and human rights are being violated. There is a difference between a democracy and others. And I don't even like a lot of the democracies that exist right now because they're not very democratic, or at least they're democratic, as you say, in a weird way. But I really think that it's very important to support people who are trying to get regime change when they're in a repressive situation. Adam, you have your hand up. You don't have to put your hand up, just butt in.
Well, I didn't want to talk over people, but I was hoping to get everyone's perspective. How much of a buffer is China and Russia, or are China and Russia acting on some of the smaller states in Asia and also the Pacific that don't have democratic regimes? If we see China or Russia shift to democracy, do you think we'll see other states, the Philippines or Myanmar or Turkmenistan, also follow suit? Are they maintaining these undemocratic regimes because of the buffering effect that the largest states such as China, Russia, and I guess even India to an extent are allowing? Which one would be the linchpin, I guess, for a democratic shift in the region?
Is democracy represented by loaning people or granting people millions of dollars to do things in their country? That's one of my questions. I ask that because I was in Indonesia. I worked for an international heavy civil engineering firm, ground stabilization, landslide recovery, and so on. And we did a lot of work in East Timor immediately after the carnage, the invasion by the Indonesian military and the burning of Dili for about the next year. And I was there when democracy took hold under the auspices of the United Nations mission. And the democracy was, I think, well-intentioned, but so many things were forgotten in the program that it failed. And the minute the election was over, everybody went back to fighting each other and burning each other's houses. It was terrible. I have never seen such carnage, and I've been in a lot of places where there's been carnage. And one of the things that the democratic United Nations world missed was, okay, let's hold elections so that people can elect who they want to be their government. Okay, we're going to have an election. Whether we like it or not, when there's election, some people win the election and some people lose the election. And one thing that wasn't done in East Timor that directly caused the post-invasion carnage was that the people encouraged to have an election weren't educated, informed, helped to understand what being a loser in a democratic election means. So the minute they lost, they thought they lost. So they're going to go back to war because obviously they didn't win. So in imposing, and I use that word, Metta knows this, I was the director of curriculum at Canada's National Defence College for 5 years. Visited more than 120 countries for 3 to 5 to 8 day trips, and some of them were not democracies in the extreme. But it was amazing the differences about opinion about how this election idea was taken. I mean, can I start at home? What percentage of the Canadian electorate did Justin Trudeau get in our last election? I mean, is it 30% or 31% or something like that? So, you know, is a significant minority enough to be considered a democratically elected government? Anyway, I am worried for democracy.
33.12%.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Yeah. But I am more worried by the sort of partnership that is evolving that affects our Arctic, that affects our country big time, of Russia and China, China and Russia.
You're worried because they're economically developed? I don't care about that. I think good for them. I hope they do. I'm worried because they're repressing the Uyghurs and they're, you know, asserting the people in Hong Kong, and they're maybe going to war against Taiwan, and they're and certainly the worst from my point of view is that in the very Arctic that you're so happy about, the goddamn thing is going to falling to pieces. I mean, the permafrost is going to kill us all, and they aren't paying attention to it. I mean, they are really the most dangerous. I would say the most dangerous thing in the world right now is the melting clathrates and permafrost in the Arctic. And you didn't mention that. Why are you so happy about what the Russians are doing there? I'm horrified by what they're doing in the Arctic. Boy, am I on it today. I don't know what's the matter with me. I thought I was in a good mood, but I'm in a really horrible mood.
I'm unhappy the Russians are so far ahead of us. And they're intending to stay there. And they intend to have control over whatever they want to have control over. And the Chinese are helping them.
They live there. They live in the Arctic and we don't. And you don't want to live there, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't either. But they have a million people, or maybe several million, I don't know, a whole bunch of people in the Arctic, and we have almost nobody. So of course they have more influence there. They're developing and they have a lot of resources. But the thing is that they're paying no attention to the most impending calamity of all. And actually, we're not either. So I can't blame them exactly, but they're worse off in terms of their deliberate ignorance about climate change. And believe me, I'm in touch with people in Russia who are supposedly as smart as you and I, but nevertheless, they act as if climate change is a big hoax. And that's ridiculous.
If I may, because of my security background, the Russian military is not in any way of the opinion that climate change is a hoax. All of their work, refurbishing, rebuilding, building, expanding infrastructure, whether it's military infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, or mixed infrastructure, is being done at the highest levels of science, because they realize if it isn't, it's not going to last very long. And of course, they're poor. Was it Siberia this summer that had the heat wave?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Not only that, but they had wildfires that their wildfire was worse than all of the other wildfires in the world put together. And it was a terrible summer for wildfires going on everywhere. So, and they ignore it. So I'm sorry, but Putin has until now deliberately played down that. He didn't go to Glasgow, etc. And you cannot find, I've been really looking for climate change NGOs in Russia who are serious about it, and you can't find them.
We can talk on the margins. I know 2 of them.
Okay, good. Give me their phone numbers. I'm going to shut up because obviously there's something wrong with me today.
I have a thing about the Uyghurs, if I can expose it at the risk of some fireworks going on. And that is, what is the evidence we have, and how strong is it, and how impartial is it that there are these allegations of Chinese mistreatment, the forced labor, the genocide even, which is a highly Holocaust-style word, which House of Commons evidently goes along with, but the Canadian Senate does not. My understanding is that the evidence, forgive me, the reports that have come out on this have come out from about 2, possibly 3 Washington think tanks, which are interrelated, and 1 Australian, which is also financed by Washington. So all fingers point to 1 financing source, and and also to 1 researcher, in particular, Adrian Zenz, the German researcher based in Virginia. So I take all that with a bit of I'd like to see it much better substantiated, but I don't see that being happening. What I would say about Xinjiang is that it's a strategically very important part of China. Though it looks like it's on the far forgotten west, it's in fact a gateway to Europe for trains, for freight trains which go out that way at the rate of, 1,000 a month right now, all the way to Europe, taking half the time of a ship. And that's quite a lot when I look at the freight trains that go through Kingston right now. The other thing that goes through Xinjiang is the other direction are the pipelines. So that's causes my interest for both for oil and for gas from Central Asia. They're huge, they're very long, they're longer than the Canadian ones. And then they're extended all the way down to Hong Kong and across to Shanghai in enormously long pipelines, like 5,000 kilometers long within China alone. So from a Western point of view, to chip away at Xinjiang is good sport. And so it is to chip away on Hong Kong and to chip away on Taiwan. But I see all this as trying to put the pressures on China on the weak spots, to fragment it, to have it break up, into the situation it was in the 19th century, which the Chinese call their century of humiliation, or even in the 1930s, where you had Chinese warlords running the damn place, of which one was the strongest, and that was Shanghai Shek, who when defeated in 1949, went to Taiwan. And of course, that's so all that's going on. And I say, okay, why are we focusing so strongly that we would diplomatically boycott the Olympics? But at the same time, there are things in Canada one could think about. The First Nations, the residential schools, all that stuff. So I again feel that this is that though there may be human rights issues, I don't know, in Xinjiang, I still think that it's a put-up job on the part of Washington and on the part of our press in acting as a megaphone for all this. So that's me stirring it up a bit.
You notice me being quiet.
I guess I'm not as strongly into John's position that we don't know about what's happening in China, but I will admit to a fear that I think the world would be a hell of a lot worse place if either Russia or China internally erupted, imploded, or whatever. And I think because of social things, there's a possibility that could happen in China, which is why I'm frightened that they might divert attention from their internal challenges, pollution, water, unbelievable wealth inequality, by an adventure to correct history by going to Taiwan. So in my foresight world, I try to make connections, connect the dots. And I'm not pretending to be right and I'm not pretending to be wrong, but I can see a lot of connections between the good things that have happened in China in terms of bringing hundreds of millions out of poverty and their technological progress together with their other agenda. And their other agenda worry me. I have two friends here in Kingston who are Chinese Canadians who both have been approached by people from the embassy in Ottawa about becoming members of Confucius Institutes. And my understanding that Confucius Institutes is very much, first and foremost, a PR operation for the Communist Party in China. They're uncomfortable. They have family in China.
Do they feel pressured?
Very.
Very. So in other words, this is just a casual invitation, but this is an intimidation.
This is one of the questions they're always asked in these discussions is, why won't you?
Are they Canadian citizens or Chinese citizens?
They're Canadian citizens now, but they came from China and they still have family, some in Shanghai and some in Beijing. Mm-hmm. So I guess we're in a world, in fact, a world that Jane Goodall was clearly interested in passing on to everybody. We're in contemporary uncertainty on almost every major issue.
True. Okay. I think if John feels comfortable letting go of his issue, at least momentarily, because I would go back and fight you. If you want to fight, I'll fight you. Because I think the Chinese are doing terrible things, and I'm quite sure that we have plenty of evidence. I've actually done talk shows with people who experienced it. So I'm not gonna let that one pass. But nevertheless, I think I'd love to hear David talk about this momentous webinar that he heard between Jane Goodall and Jonathan Granoff, because I don't know what it was about, but it sounds like a juicy one.
This was the first time I've heard from the Oxford Union, who were the sponsor. And it was moderated by the president of the Oxford Union, a Chinese student, unbelievably eloquent, thoughtful, polite, inclusive. Lasted only an hour. But as I said at the beginning, it was one of the best things I've ever heard. It was titled Realistic Human Security: Principles and Policies for the Individual, the Nation, and the Planet. Now, the minute I got this invitation, and I can't remember whether it came through a friend or somebody in the World Academy, but anyway, when it said human security, all my antenna went on, because I've been involved viscerally in human security operations for 35 years. In fact, more than that. Human security in the sense of recovery from disasters, recovery from conflict, resilience building. In the 1990s, human security was Canada's foreign policy.
That's right. And what happened to it? So
And
please,
what
I'm
happened-
dying to hear more about the webinar and what these two people said about it all.
I guess I had never heard Jane Goodall speak before, but I've been in conferences and heard Jonathan Granoff many times.
Me too, yeah.
Another thing that drew me into this was Jane Goodall founded the Jane Goodall Institute in 1977 called Roots and Shoots.
Right.
Jonathan Granoff serves on her board of directors.
Oh,
Jonathan Granoff is a president of the Global Security Institute.
right.
Jane Goodall serves on the board of advisors for the Global Security Institute.
Oh, so they're good friends.
buddies. I mean, they obviously talk to each other quite often. How will I put this sort of politely? Jane Goodall was the winner big time. Jonathan, frankly, had not done his homework on Jane Goodall. It was, in effect, a contest. Now, this is David Harries, but I'll stand by this. I haven't found all my notes yet because I'm still reflecting. It was a contest between a contemporaneous realist, Jane Goodall, who looks at the whole picture: humans, states, living things, plants, the earth, the oceans, everything. Whereas Jonathan, as he has been for 30 or 40 years, is fixed on human security, which is, we all know, was initiated as a counterbalance to state security. And it still carries a lot of that baggage. And you
I'm gonna, David, just 1 second. I want to tell you something. The people have been testing the fire alarm today and all day yesterday, and apparently they're going to come back and do it again. So it may be that I'll have to say, you know, when this thing goes off, and it can awaken the dead. You can't believe the loudness. So if they do this, I have no power over it. I can't stop it. I'll have to stop you and then, you know, have you start, you know, fill in or something. So don't be surprised if we have this awful, I'm sorry, it's going to be awful. Yeah. So go ahead, and I'm sorry, but it's going to be a big editing job, and we can fix it, but it may be troublesome. Here we go right now. So, all right, go on. Go on, David. I'm sorry.
No, there's I have huge respect for both these individuals, and they clearly have huge respect for each other. But what I learned, what I saw, what I felt was a tense tension between their respective positions. Jonathan is a film producer, a lawyer, a geopolitician, and Jane Goodall is a humanist in every sense of the word. And there were many places where they were in the same room together, but
Different visions, different worlds. Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of it, Jane was talking about the contemporary challenges we face right now that affect all of humanity.
But you're saying she also includes the whole of the earth, so it's more than humanity. It's the universe. It's the whole interconnected human, beyond human community.
And her new book of Hope, that was just been published. I just read a short review of it. It's very good. Jonathan, in his eloquent fashion, continued to promote human security as the human path to a better future. But again, he was not involved in the discussion of what our one planet includes that is living.
Right.
So a few weeks ago at a seminar for the World Academy of Art and Science, I gave a short blurb on, I wanted this title, Human Security, changed to Humanity Security. And that includes biodiversity and nature and humans and people and everything. And of course, it's a play on words, but it isn't, at least it doesn't just say humans. And twice I heard Jane Goodall say, and John, I think this was your title, your term earlier, Titanic struggle, that she sees we are in, and unless we deal with the whole of humanity's context, we're not going to do very well.
Well, I like this now. I'm able to relate to all of this now. Thank you.
Jonathan is a master historian. Those of you who've heard him or who know him will realize this. And he was able to point out a raft of events in history showing that we're, in parentheses, improving. Jane, from her expression, wasn't having a lot of this. There are so many concurrent, collective, connected challenges of our planet for all living things that we got to get on it. So I'm sorry that isn't very eloquent, but that's
what I can't wait. Can you just say the name of her book again?
Oh, I have to get it. I didn't.
Was something about hope.
Yeah, Book of Hope. Yeah, it's
Book
brand
of
new.
Hope.
It's just out.
Oh, I must.
Her latest
look at
book.
it.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think it's come out under her institute, which
Okay.
is Roots and Shoots.
Right.
Which I love the
know
title.
that. Well, that is absolutely wonderful, and I certainly can resonate with Jane Goodall. So I'd just like to get a little clarity, David, on your valuing the shift to humanity. So are you really talking about how at least human beings can be living with a greater humanity? In other words, the best of us, ourselves as human, which is to really be aware of the whole picture and to respond with compassion, with care, with at least respect for the whole. Is that how you understand, or perhaps
Yes.
say yourself how you understand humanity?
Yes. The goal is that all living things are able to live together on our one planet. This is probably not a good word, fairly and with hope.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful. And that's what I'm missing in the whole rest of the discussion today. It's a very big change of vision and values. And I resonate with Jane Goodall.
I'm telling you, I am now a disciple. I mean, I knew about her background, and at one of our NDC, National Defense College trips to Africa, we went to one of her places, one of her centers. She wasn't there then. And it was moving, to say the least. But hearing her and watching her, and we all talk about Zoom being a little impersonal thing. Well, it's better than not seeing each other. And what I watched in that 45 minutes before the questions and things started was moving. I will remember this for a long time.
Great.
Did they
Thank you.
definitely disagree about? What, I mean, you've said that they talk past each other, but what I don't understand is what were the substantive issues where they, in terms of policy, where their policies would clash?
Metta, I don't, in the 45 minutes before there were a few questions, there weren't sort of differences. There were just presentations of positions, of their position. And Jane was into the here and now for all. And Jonathan was into the human ability to do better.
Why is that a problem? I mean, it sounds like they're both exactly on the same wavelength. I mean, you're describing a diversity of rhetoric, but I don't, unless you can show me where their policies wouldn't fit together, I don't know why that's something to worry about.
I'd have to think about that. I guess where I saw Jonathan's position was that it was just one component of Jane's position.
Yeah.
Just one component. The humans, the human beings part of the.
Right.
One of the interesting things was about 10 minutes into the session, Jonathan, who, as I said earlier, credible person, very respectful of Jane, pointed out how she was one of the most famous, world famous scientists. And she came back, I'm not a scientist, I'm a humanist. And she said, I became what I am because my mentor selected me because I'd never been to university. I got that in my notes. Wow. So she does not consider herself a scientist. And again, in the 45 minutes, we never got into policies.
No.
We had a chance to have two very accomplished and thoughtful people present their image of where we are and where we could be. And in my view, Jane's was the whole picture and Jonathan's was part of the picture.
Yeah, so it's not that Jonathan's was bad, but when you hear Jane's, you realize that unless we see the whole picture, then we're not going to get to where we really would like to get. It has to be, that deep respect for all.
Oh, it's backwards. Freedom from fear, our foreign policy in the 90s. I looked at this after this webinar. it's all pictures of humans.
Hmm.
Humans. There's no plants, no animals, no oceans,
Yeah.
no
And so
soils.
isn't that incredible that it really shows the evolution that has taken place since then quite rapidly? Because I remember back at that time, I was grateful that that was Canada's foreign policy. And yet with our greater appreciation for our interconnectedness with everything, I mean, I think there's a growth in awareness that although we need more Jane Goodalls, but to see, unless we see our relationships with the whole, we're missing the fullness of what we as human beings can be, and that all together in relationship will get us to a more hope of peace. Well, thank you. I wish I had heard that webinar.
I'm still trying to connect to the Oxford Union, but of course,
Yeah.
having never been an Oxford Unionist, I don't have an immediate address, but I'm asking them if this was recorded.
Oh,
And
yes, yes.
if it is, I'll send it to you all.
Oh, wonderful. Thank
thanks.
you. That would be great.
Well, Oxford Union usually puts on debates, and I'm not sure whether what you're describing was even advertised as a debate. It sounds like you're putting it forward to us as a clash of opinions.
Oh, I didn't say clash.
Well,
I didn't say clash.
no, all right, a diverse, something that, you know, he was small and she was big. All right, but I'm interested in the places where we have to make decisions that are fateful. And I haven't heard you say anything about how there's any incompatibility in what they would propose or what would be derived from their two different positions. If you can show me that there's an issue or a problem, then I'll get excited. But frankly, I'm bored.
Okay.
Again, in 45 minutes, two people with backgrounds like Jane Goodall and Jonathan Granoff are not going to have much more than skim the surface of their positions. And it wasn't a debate. It was never advertised. It's just a panel, realistic human security. And human security was the manner in which Jonathan approached the hour, and Jane Goodall expanded it into what I am now calling, and we're now working on in the World Academy, humanity security. Because it's bigger than just humans. And I know this from some very difficult times in Cyprus, the former Yugoslavia, East Timor, Cambodia, Egypt, that a focus on only the human side leaves a lot of work still to be done, even if all the human things are by and large succeeded in. So I'm a Goodallist.
Yes, well, it sounds like it was a very significant aha for you moment, and an opening, you know, a broadening, an opening that you experience as
I
hope.
make no bones about it.
Those are precious moments. I'm very happy for you. Mm-hmm.
I guess one of the things that surprised me too, I'd have to go back. I'd have to see the recording, but I know I don't have it anywhere in my notes that the pandemic was not an issue, and climate change was not an issue. It was about humanity, in the security of humanity in the largest sense. I know one of the questioners asked about, sort of what's next after the pandemic. But yeah, everything for me was new and interesting and good in the
Yes,
45 minutes.
that's terrific. Well, I'm certainly going to look for Jane's book, and I'm very glad that I think we're sort of coming to the end of our time today, but I'm very glad this is where we're ending, personally. Because
I'm not ended. I'm only beginning.
Well, that's true. It is only a beginning.
I am so dissatisfied with this kind of. I don't like what David has said one bit. I want I want to pin it down. If you say that you didn't talk about COVID and you didn't talk about climate change, well, then you haven't talked about anything of any value or importance. And if you say you're talking about humanity, well, blah, blah, blah. That's of no importance. What's important is solving real problems.
That's what Jane is.
You haven't talked about real problems. And a week started off with a real problem about, is democracy going to survive or not? Can it hold up against the economies of a totalitarian system? Those are real problems. John and I disagreed about whether the Uyghurs are really being persecuted or not. That's a real problem. Those are problems that we really have to deal with. And I don't see any purpose whatever in talking about different rhetorical positions about the meaning of life. I want us to get right down to talking about pragmatic, serious challenges that, in fact, we are in real danger of extinction, friends. This is no joke.
That's right. Humanity is in danger of extinction. Humanity. Because whether it's climate change or COVID or inequality or conflict or pollution or the rewriting of history again and again and again, things were really calm 100 years ago. Only victors wrote history. Now everybody writes history. There's 7.5 billion historians on Earth. They're writing more history every day. That's hurting humanity because the uncertainty about how we are together just gets intensified. So,
okay, now, all right, now you're saying something interesting. What do you mean uncertainty? That maybe have some pay dirt in it. Let's play with that a little bit. What uncertainty is it? I'm certain. I know a lot about melting cloth rates. I know that those Uyghurs really are being persecuted. I know a whole bunch of things that scare the daylights out of me and should scare everybody. So what's uncertain?
Uncertain whether anytime soon governments as a whole will be competent. Uncertain as a whole whether the combination of historic pollution and the horrific carnage that by and large we think is caused by climate change, weather effects and so on, the food supply, chain, the fairness of medical accessibility.
David, We know answers to every one of those things.
We don't.
There's no
We don't.
uncertainty. The certainty is that we are not going to do the things that we know answers are, that we have the answers to do and we should be doing. And we're pretty damn certain we're not going to do it in time. It looks like we're failing big time and we're not going to get there. That's not even uncertain. That's high probability that we're going to go extinct, man.
Metta, as is sometimes the case, I have no answer to that. I can only say that humanity is the one context in which this is going to have to be addressed. And
well, maybe I'm on your side. I don't know, because I can't tell what the difference is. I mean, I don't know that I oppose you. I like the word humanity. I think I took care of the biggest vision of what the planet consists of, which is the squirrels out on my lawn, which now have turned white, which interests me a lot. Things like that. I'm sorry. We do have to probably end this because obviously we're in a deadlock. But you get the last word. Or maybe we should let John Foster have the last word, because I beat up on him quite a while ago and he's been quiet ever since. John, what do you?
Let me say that my silence during David's words was a fascination. I've clearly got to get up to speed and rapidly on this. My wife, Millie's, she's been out to see the chimps and all that in Africa. And I'm certainly behind the ball in this business. But no, I would just drop something to say. For me, there are three hot spots in the world that I watch. One is Taiwan, and one is Ukraine, and the third is Iran, and all that. And what's going on in Ukraine right now disturbs the living daylights out of me. But that I'm not going to try and solve in 1 minute flat.
Okay.
That's
Well, if that was the last word, it was not a very hopeful one. Because I certainly have not been very hopeful this time, and I was hoping somebody could come up with.
I've got hope.
All right, thank you, Mary Ellen. You keep holding out the hope. The rest of us.
I will, and with Jane Goodall.
hey, I am a pessimist, which is an optimist with experience.
Okay, I believe in that. All right. This has been fascinating and even enjoyable, at least after my blood pressure goes back down.
Thank you so much for having us.